Welcome. In this video, I'm going to break down the hidden psychology behind storytelling brands. That way you can make your brand grow twice as fast. Hi, my name is Brendan Murphy, and welcome to the Alchemy of Influence YouTube channel. You've probably noticed that no matter how often you post, how polished your website looks, or how many hours you spend on client calls, people just aren't leaning in. Your content feels like it's getting lost in the noise. You see other coaches, consultants, and course creators getting traction with half the effort, and you wonder if there's something you're missing. It feels like you're working harder than ever, but your message isn't landing. Your prospects scroll past your ads, bounce off your sales page, or simply don't feel compelled to take the next step. And inside, it leaves you wondering what you're doing wrong. Now, imagine this instead. You put out a simple video and your audience hangs on every word. People message you saying, "I feel like you were talking directly to me." Prospects show up in a state where they already trust you, convinced you understand them better than anyone else. Instead of chasing cold leads and trying to convince them to work with you, you're building a loyal community that advocates for you because your brand feels like it was made just for them. Marketing feels natural and effortless. You don't have to push, it just resonates. The truth is, it's a lot harder to grow any kind of brand in any kind of market without effective storytelling. Studies show that brands using stories in their marketing grow revenue twice as fast as their competitors. Neuroscience research shows that stories are up to 22 times more memorable than facts alone because they build immediate emotional connection and embed themselves deeply in the subconscious. Without them, you'll just keep blending in. You'll be stuck relying on discounts, longer sales calls, and endless hustle just to scrape by. I discovered this fact back in 2008 when I started my spiritual healing business. I was living with my mother. My life in Portland had collapsed, and I really didn't have many resources to work with. What's worse, her house was out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains of New Mexico, and so no one else was really around. I had the idea to write a long email telling the story of my initiation into a mystery school where I learned my spiritual healing techniques. I asked my mother to send that email to her friends. That way I could start getting clients. It worked. Before I knew it, I had over 10 sessions booked, and they were coming to this house in the middle of nowhere, driving from other states in some cases. After that, I designed a flyer that I put up on bulletin boards all around the area. This had a shorter version of that story. When I posted it, I started getting calls. In a couple of months, I was holding retreats where I was teaching these spiritual healing techniques to groups of people. I was able to charge $1,000 a person for a weekend workshop, and my clients were referring me to other people. It was very interesting because I started to understand that a great story is something that people want to tell others. When they encounter it, they will repeat that story to all of their friends. And this does your marketing for you via word of mouth. But it won't work unless your story is compelling and relevant and creates the necessary belief. Unfortunately, most entrepreneurs just aren't leveraging this. They invest thousands into pretty logos, fonts, and design work without giving their message a soul. They copy competitors' taglines or funnel hack them, but it rarely winds up working. They cram their websites full of features and benefits or drown their audience in logical arguments that don't move the needle. And when none of it works, they assume they just need to hustle harder. Now, sometimes that's true, but here's what the real problem usually is. Design without story is surface level. It looks nice, but it doesn't anchor emotion. Copycat branding just creates sameness, blending you into the crowd. Feature-driven messaging speaks to the rational mind, but most buyers make decisions emotionally. And logic alone doesn't stick, because the subconscious filters out anything that doesn't feel personally relevant. Also, while the logical lessons that many people teach are the same, stories are always unique. That makes it much easier to remember them. When someone tells you a unique, compelling story, they become a unique, compelling person. The real solution is to stop focusing so much on information and start inviting people into a narrative that you've created. Your brand has to give your prospects an identity transformation. They'll never understand the value of that transformation if they can't see it in their minds and feel it in their hearts. Humans are wired for drama, not data. To do this, there are 4 principles you need to understand. First, people don't buy information. They buy a new identity. They buy who they want to become. When you simply convey information or teach things without using stories to illustrate your points, it might be exactly what they need to know to get what they want. But just learning that information won't inspire them to take action on it and get a result. They have to believe that if they make use of the information, they'll achieve what they want or gain a worthwhile reward. That's why so many courses have such low completion rates. It's why kids get so bored in school and don't do their homework. It's not because the lessons aren't worth learning. It's because the students fail to see the point. A great story helps them see the point before you even start teaching. When you tell it masterfully, what they want seems achievable, and suddenly they want to learn how to make it happen for themselves. It gets them to value the information because now they see why it matters. Second, emotion drives action. Facts may inform, but feelings are what actually convert prospects into buyers and buyers into implementers. Feelings are where all the energy is. It's not in people's heads. It takes energy to get people to move, and energy is emotional. The story has to touch people. It can't just be a series of facts. You can't just say this happened, then this happened, then this happened. You have to engage the senses, the emotions, and you have to dramatize it. You have to hook them, get them emotionally attached to the characters in the story, and get them to care about what's going to happen next. You have to make your tale so gripping that they forget themselves in the process of hearing it. And that's one of the reasons I created Alchemy of Influence. In this private mastermind, I show coaches, consultants, and course creators how to unlock the hidden psychology of storytelling and transform their brands into magnetic forces. Inside, you'll learn how to harness persuasion at the deepest level so people don't just hear your message, they feel it, identify with it, and are inspired to take action because of it, resulting in profound transformation. There's a link in the description of this video if you want to learn more about it. Third, stories shape memory and perception. Narrative brands are 22 times more likely to be remembered. Why? Because that's how human memory works. The human brain attempts to frame every piece of information it gets into the context of a story because that's what gives information meaning to us. For most of human history, verbal stories were literally the only way to convey information from one human being to another. There was no such thing as writing, no such thing as the internet, no such thing as television or radio or YouTube. So to get any kind of information at all, someone had to tell you a story about it. That's why myths were so popular in the old world, why everyone in a culture knew them. The gods were the universal characters in the cultural drama, and the myths formed the foundation of cultural perception, explaining everything that primitive understanding couldn't. When a member of a tribe went on a journey far away and came back, the only way they could convey the information about what happened to the other members of the tribe when they returned was to tell the story of the journey. Fourth, archetypes build identification. When you master the use of the universal roles that make up the fundamental building blocks of human nature, the lover, the magician, the warrior, and the sovereign, you can pull total strangers deep into your narrative, causing them to develop intense emotional attachment quickly. It gets listeners to identify with the characters in the story because they begin to develop feelings for them based on their behaviors and personalities. The more emotionally invested they get in the characters, the harder time they'll have pulling away from the narrative. Eventually, they'll buy into the narrative because it inspires them and gives them a sense of purpose and meaning they never had before. Once you grasp these principles, the path becomes clear. The first step is to write your own story of transformation that is relevant to the transformation you are offering your clients. Start by listing your 5 biggest achievements and your 5 biggest struggles. Then, choose an achievement and a struggle you can link together into a compelling story about the relevant topic. List out the characters in the story and determine the roles they played. You might change some names to protect the identities of the people involved. Other than that, the story should be true. This story can be as long or as short as you want. The point isn't to get a final version to tell others, but rather to help you ground your identity in your transformation and give you some relevant points to discuss with clients. Then map out your audience's before and after, where they are now and where they want to be. You should be able to speak to these scenarios clearly because you've experienced them yourself. Ultimately, what's really going to get their attention and hold it is telling them their story, not yours. But you can't just leave it at that. You have to contrast the story they've been living out and experiencing with the story they would rather be living and experiencing. Then show them how your offer helps them bridge that gap. Once you've done all that, position yourself as the guide, not the hero. That way they feel empowered to become the hero in their own story rather than overshadowed by your achievements in your story. This is where you weave your story into your offer. Finally, weave all of that into every touch point, from your social media to your website to your sales calls, so it becomes the consistent heartbeat of your brand. Even if you master storytelling, though, there's another thing that can confuse your prospects. If your visual identity or the vibe of your marketing doesn't match the essence of the stories you're telling, people will get confused and they won't buy. In the next video, I'll show you how design and vibe psychology cements your story in the subconscious of your audience so that your logo, your images, your colors, your fonts, and every sensory element of your brand amplifies your brand identity instead of distracting from it. These things matter, but you don't want to create them before you've found a good way to position yourself and you've got the relevant stories written up. Once you have those, the design process gives meaning to your logo and your brand, setting it apart from competitors and giving your prospects and customers a unique feeling they will associate with your brand. See you there.